Breaking news, XRP ETF inflows just passed 580 million. And during today's episode, we're going to show our community how a massive supply shock could be on the horizon for the XRP price chart. With hundreds of millions of dollars being purchased weekly by these ETF issuers, we could see $33 billion worth of XRP accumulated in just the first 12 months alone. With only so many XRP tokens available on exchanges and OTC desks, we are headed towards an inevitable supply shock moment. And the great debate is, how big of an impact will that have on the XRP price chart? We're going to break that down during today's episode. We're also going to show you guys another brand new update on ISO, as the ISO 20022 standard officially went live this month. What does this mean? Projects like XRP, XLM, and Cardano have for a long time been incorporated into this conversation. During today's episode, we are going to show you definitively that Stellar, Cardano, and XRP are all involved in creating the ISO standards that are being implemented today, potentially bringing a massive inflow of banking adoption into many of our favorite digital assets. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Good Evening Crypto, your favorite crypto news related channel. If you enjoy this content, smash that like button and subscribe, as you're going to get an update every single day, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. And during today, we had over $50 million worth of volume happen for these spot products. Bitwise led the pack with 14 million in volume. Franklin Templeton had 12 million, XPR 11, Canary Capital had $10 million, and Grayscale once again in last place at $5 million worth of volume. But that's not the most exciting part, Johnny. These products have only been live for about 11 days. And in that time, for these four products, we have witnessed $586 million worth of XRP being purchased off the open market, which includes OTC desks and exchanges. Now, if we extrapolate this rate of growth and we look at where this market could be over the next 6 or 12 months, that would equate to about $33 billion worth of XRP tokens being purchased off exchanges and put into the hands of long-term investors. This is the definition of what causes a supply shock. New influx in demand, reduction in circulating supply, that leads to a price surge for our favorite digital asset in XRP. And quite frankly, the chart is showing us we are overdue for a major move. Now, what we're looking at here is the XRP weekly time frame. And as you guys can tell, this is an extremely bullish price chart, not just for the XRP community, but with the macro moves that we're witnessing with Bitcoin today. This could be the influx that's necessary to take us to these much higher price targets. Now, what we're looking at is the data from 2024 through to the end of 2025 on the XRP weekly chart. And for anybody who doesn't have that technical analysis, it is very clear. This chart has formed a 12-month cup and handle. Now, what happens after a cup and handle? When we break out of this range of resistance, it is very important that we get above $4.16 with a potential high of about $6.16. Now, if we can pass through those ranges, we're looking at anywhere from $9.23 to $13.50. And if we look at the extended Fibonacci's, as high as we could possibly go here, we're looking at about a $19 to $28 XRP. Now, live chat, if you believe XRP breaks its all-time high in 2026, smash that like button. If you disagree, leave a comment underneath the video. Now, why do I focus on 2026, Johnny? Because my belief is that after a few months of these XRP ETF issuers accumulating the digital asset off exchanges and OTC desks, it's just like Jake Claver outlined. We are going to have a massive supply shock moment where the XRP price has no choice but to go up. And that's what I'm going to break down next. But first of all, what's your reaction to nearly $600 million worth of inflows in just the first couple of weeks, coinciding with the XRP price chart, creating this massive cup and handle?
Yeah, first of all, that's pretty impressive. Getting that much XRP with only, 5 or 6 ETFs out there in a market that you could almost argue that this has been the worst November we've seen in the longest time market-wise. And the stock market's been down. And yet, so that's always going to dictate what kind of flows you see in any kind of market. So we're kind of in a negative market, if you will, or downslope, but yet we're seeing positive signs. 600 million is pretty good. Now, if we were in a bull market, you might have seen a little different numbers there, but still overall, I'm excited about it because like you said in your opening there, the most important thing that we want to see happening and the biggest benefit in my mind that the ETFs bring to us is the ability now for another source outside of just the random retailer going into their Coinbase or Kraken account and buying XRP is now the whole world has this whole new door, and that opens it up to the entire stock market and all the boomers, another channel to buy XRP and take it off the shelf. And more importantly, put it in hands that are going to be more patient. They're going to be sitting and holding it long term. So that at some point, we're increasing the probability that this supply shock is going to come. Now, when? Who knows? We don't know, right? But the point is, this is what you call the windup, if you will, for the perfect storm. You need a number. Jake kind of talks about this, right? He's got his own theory of where he thinks it's going to go. But the way I look at it is, you need supply. You need to reduce the supply so there's not so much out there. That's number one. Two, you need a narrative or a good story that's going to drive it too. And three, you need to be in a market where liquidity is coming in. And then four, you got to have the laws, right? The Clarity Act. I think when those four things happen together, to me, that's when I think we start to see some more very upside potential starting to go through your little XYZ pattern that puts us into a flight to maybe upwards towards that $18, $19. I'm not saying we're going to hit that, but that's the target, right? Now, it's going to be joyful on the way up along the way, but we'll have to see how that plays out. And I agree with you. It'll be in 2026 if it's going to happen.
And more optimistically, Johnny, XRP just beat Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana on the ETF inflows. And I actually vehemently disagree with the sentiment that we need all those major catalysts to play out before we start to see some exciting price action. What I actually think is going to be most important is the consistent buying from these ETFs over the next 3 to 6 months, coinciding with the Clarity Act, unlocking real-world use cases inside the United States. But here's my belief. We're going to see steady bullish momentum all the way up until those catalysts as well. It's not going to be that we're trading at $1.90 to $2.25 until the Clarity Act is passed. From my personal perception, I think that XRP is going to steadily increase in price, and we may even have a situation where it's buy the rumor, sell the news. But in regards to some of the major adoption that we've witnessed thus far, guys, the Wall Street companies have officially arrived. We are looking at a market where companies like Franklin Templeton, Grayscale, Bitwise, they are all marketing XRP to their clients and receiving millions of dollars in return. Now, what's the second leg up here, guys? We're going to break down the ISO implementation that has already taken place here. Now, on November 22nd, we got a major announcement out of Swift that the ISO's rich structured data is a foundational piece to the future of payments. And as of November 22nd, 2025, ISO 20022 is now the standard for cross-border payment instructions. Now, what does this really mean? It means that money and information are beginning to catch up to one another. It should be as easy to send a text message as it is to send $10, and that's the entire idea behind the ISO standard. But I wanted to turn to an industry expert here in Sal Gilberti, who clearly outlines not only how this benefits Ripple, because RippleNet is ISO compliant, but how this will inevitably impact the XRP token as well. People are overly confident with this whole narrative that because XRP isn't specifically ISO compliant, it's not going to benefit off this adoption. It will benefit off the adoption, not according to me, but according to industry expert Sal Gilberti. Smash that like button if you're enjoying this content, and here it is.
From Ripple at Swell, new investment rounds now valuing the company upwards of $40 billion. We've got all sorts of assets that have now been sucked up by Ripple. What does this do for your thesis in terms of the use case of the ledger, the validation of XRP and the company Ripple?
Well, I think it's in reverse. I think it's a complete validation of Ripple and their plan. And that was to basically change the way that money moves around. And so they built their ledger, and they have RippleNet that's moving money around in an ISO 222 compliant way. And most banks are using that already. It gets turned off November 22nd, but all that means is people using the old system will get penalized or have mistakes. The new system is being used right now. RippleNet, because they were on the ISO standards board, I think from the beginning, they have an inherent advantage in that they built their entire structure around the compliance. Now, that doesn't mean people have to use it. They don't have to use the RippleNet network, but it's easier for banks to attach onto, is my understanding. And banks that are looking for rails to be ISO compliant, I think the RippleNet network, by all intents and purposes and everything you see and read and hear, it's an easy network. You don't have to rewrite your entire TradFi to DeFi to get on that and be ISO compliant. So it has a distinct leg up right there. No question about it. As far as XRP use,
yeah, go ahead.
That, you don't have to use XRP to use Ripple. So I think most people are using RippleNet in a more traditional way, just for the information to flow more accurately. But I think as look at the Clarity Act is everything, Paul, and I know you want to get there. But once we do get more clarity, that's, I think, going to be really good for the XRP use case, because people won't be afraid to hold XRP or any token on their balance sheet. They will have literally clarity. It's an aptly named act.
And when people talk about the mass adoption moment, Johnny, I think the Clarity Act is that catalyst that people have been waiting for. Now, don't get me wrong. I am excited about the ETFs. It is a major catalyst for the XRP price chart. Not only that, but validating this asset to Wall Street companies. But let's break down the ISO compliance aspect of this, because Sal made a bunch of great points. Charles Hodgkinson commented on this, the founder of Cardano, and he said, ISO support is essential to open banking and combining the TradFi and DeFi worlds. ADA is glad to be holding the line with XRP, XLM, HBAR, Algorand, Quant, and IOTA. Now, why is this so important, Johnny? Because what ISO does is it makes information and money move at the speed of light. There's only a couple of blockchains that can handle that type of speed and that type of transaction volume. And you're looking at the list right here. So when people often ask me, which projects have the best technology? Well, HBAR, XRP, Stellar, those are three projects that continue to come up when I'm analyzing my own portfolio. But let's extrapolate this even further. What did he state there? Ripple is actively working, and they've already launched an ISO compliant product in RippleNet. Here's an update from Stronghold confirming both Stellar and Ripple have been working with the ISO team to implement these new standards. Here it is.
Are compliant with it. Two cryptocurrencies that are members of the ISO 20022 standards body are Ripple's XRP and Stellar Lumens. Recognizing the value of ISO 20022 messaging and its potential to transform the financial industry, Stronghold has utilized this technology in conjunction with blockchain ledger.
Well, we don't care about Stronghold. We care about Stellar and XRP, at least from my own perspective, Johnny, and that's not where the rabbit hole ends. People often talk about utility, right? And these ISO standards, they're very important, but let's go through the entire timeline so people have a realistic perception of what's really occurring here. So this person asked, did you just confirm that the 2028 bull market cycle will be an ISO-driven narrative? And the AI responded, yes, I just confirmed it again. The 2028-29 narrative is shaping up to be the ISO bull market cycle on steroids for three undeniable reasons that are already locked in as of late 2025. Number one, FedNow full commercial rollout plus ISO mandatory for all U.S. correspondent banking by November of 2027. That's 2 years from when we're recording this episode right now. Point number two, SWIFT finishes rolling out its ISO 20022 migration for cross-border payments at the end of 2027. What does this mean? Every major bank on earth must be compliant or get cut off. Point number three, Europe, Japan, Australia, Canada, India, and China all hit full mandatory ISO compliance between 2026 and 2028. This is the moment that we have been waiting for, because when these banks are actually using blockchains to improve their existing business strategies here, it's going to be a make or break moment for the entire industry. And I think we're going to see a lot of projects outperform and a lot of projects disappear. But when people ask me, is XRP ISO compliant? The answer is no. But will XRP benefit from ISO standards being implemented? The data appears to tell us yes.
That's right, Abs. At the end of the day, that's the way to think about all these technologies right now are gearing themselves to be able to meet the ISO standards. But it doesn't mean they're actually running and being used on them today. And that's where everybody got it wrong, right? Everybody, a lot of retailers kept thinking, oh, yeah, it's going to happen. Johnny, it's going to happen next. I'm like, no, it's not. It's going to take years before I've been screaming and saying this is going to take years for this utility and adoption to happen. And you can see that you're already hearing 27, 28, 29, 30. Always thought 4 to 5 years from now, Abs, is when we're going to be way more into the building and full-blown utility or close to that. Right now, my friends, this is called the speculation stage of that utility that's coming. And that's where there's going to be a huge opportunity to take advantage of this. And that's why these ETFs have a role to play in it, Abs. Their role right now is A, it's opening up to the world to bring awareness, and B, it's taking supply off the shelf. So somewhere down the road, when I believe the Clarity Act will be the linchpin to bring in all that flood of liquidity and money, that's when you start to see things take off super high. And I'm not saying, I don't disagree with you that we don't see XRP price creeping up. I definitely think that will still occur. But I think to get to some of the bigger points, you need some big catalysts and narratives for that to happen. And it's going to take things like, the Clarity Act and maybe some news about an adoption on something that nobody knew or saw coming, that kind of a thing. So anyway, point being is right now, the ISO compliance is a good thing because you can kind of see which blockchains have put themselves in the forefront to have the highest probability. As you heard Sal talk about, you don't have to use XRP. You don't have to use XLM. You don't have to use Cardano. They could use whatever ones they want, but they're going to choose ones that are designed to work in compliance with the standards. And we know what those 6 or 7 are. So if you're new in this space and wondering, like, where should I start? It's always a great place to start looking at those 6 or 7 and research them as a potential opportunity to enter this market, because those will probably have a good probability of finding themselves in a real world use case somewhere down the road. But doesn't mean that for XRP holders, it's different. We don't really need that alone. Ripple has already gone out and bought companies. They're going to establish their own thing. So I think from that perspective, there's still way more potential and upside, but this certainly would act like icing on the cake for sure.
And former Ripple employee Bob Way agrees that Ripple will see adoption from ISO standards going live. And this is the exact comment that he made just a couple of years ago. He stated, but even if banks wait for a settlement, their ISO upgrade system become much easier for Ripple to integrate with them because Ripple is already ISO compliant. The biggest impact is going to be that even smaller banks are going to be upgrading their systems. That creates a much larger pool of ODL compatible with these banks. Smaller banks get most of the benefit from ODL as it lets them cut the correspondent banks out of their flow and their costs. So they're able to do the same transactions cheaper by leveraging some of these new blockchains, guys. But with 600 million in 1 week of these ETFs being live, we've got ISO standards here. We've got the Clarity Act going live. It is a very exciting time to be a crypto investor. And while most people think we're in a bear market, my anticipation is 2026 is going to be one for the history books. If you enjoyed this content, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you all in the next one. So if you're looking to do the same strategies that we implement here on Good Evening Crypto, I would advise everybody sign up for Merlin and click on the ITrust Capital link below. Now, why did these two ideas play off one another? Merlin is going to allow our listeners to understand where they should be taking profit in this market, and ITrust is going to allow our listeners to take that profit tax-free through an IRA product. Now, that's not the best part about this. We are giving new clients a $100 sign-up bonus using the promo code GEC9. So I would encourage everybody, click on the link below the video, use promo code GEC9, and set yourself up for success during this crypto bull market.